Greetings and love from the island of Catalina. Several months ago, 70 of us shared the Catalina experience. And then after that, several more heard it on tape. And we know now that for all of us, it was something very special. We started out with the idea of exploring life outside the parenthesis, learning how to live in the now, finding and being obedient to the divine will. And as the seminar progressed, we learned that in order to live in the divine will, it was necessary to find our permanent life, our undying life. And this then became the focus and purpose of all our work. In the 2 months that have elapsed since then, let us indicate that you have accepted that as your goal and the purpose of your life on earth, to find your permanent self and to live in it, to be. There's no question about the progress we've made, your dedication, and the vast possibilities that are waiting for us. Some of us have glimpsed the soul realm, and we feel, like Columbus, that we have discovered something unknown to the mind of man. A kingdom, right here on earth, of such magnitude and such perfection and such fullness that it is inconceivable to human beings. And yet it is here, outside the realm of the mind, available only through the faculty called soul. And it is there that we are walking, learning how to be spiritual children, learning how to find that life which never dies. At the same time, while we have our mountain peaks, we also find the valleys, and we find those experiences where, for some reason that we cannot quite decipher, we cannot break through. We are overwhelmed by the things of this world. And we say to ourselves, what is my basic problem? What is stopping me? Please today recognize that what is stopping you is very normal. It is also so vast in its implications that it has been completely overlooked and unsuspected by mankind, even though it was taught by the Christ appearing in many forms on earth. Our problem, and our only problem, is sense hypnosis. And it is not an individual problem. It is a universal sense hypnosis. And even while we are struggling to find that I which is permanent and undying, sense hypnosis is presenting to us a me, which is temporary and very mortal. In order to find the permanent self, we find we must break the veil of sense hypnosis. We have infinite way principles. We apply them. We have sincerity. We have some measure of intelligence. We have some measure of spiritual guidance. But always there is a certain door that refuses to open. And it is because we do not have the daring, the boldness, the courage to walk through that door. Today we're going to see what we must do to break sense hypnosis. And we're going to find our way by following an individual who did it. An individual who did not wait for the return of Jesus Christ to this earth. An individual who didn't say, I'm waiting for the second coming. Instead, he went right out, broke the veil of sense hypnosis, found his permanent self, and could then announce to the world, I shall never die. And while doing it, he developed the healing consciousness to a level that is possible for you and for me. It is very doubtful that Paul had any advantages that you do not have. He certainly lived at a time when truth was unknown to the rank and file of mankind. There was as much unrest and ignorance then as now. There was as much poverty, as much fear, as much hate, as much violence. The world then and the world now might be comparable. But Paul did find another self. And furthermore, he proved it. And when he proved it, it was our good fortune that he left behind him certain codes, certain keys, certain statements that you and I can follow. Now there's one that has never been explained to my knowledge, and yet it is the key to Christ consciousness. It is the key to the realization of oneness. It is the key to life eternal. It merely needs someone to find the key and turn it in the lock. And so let's you and I do this now. I want you to come with me to Acts chapter 20. And listen as I read to you the verses from 7 to 13. Listen for the key to Christ consciousness, because it will give you that step, that necessary step that you have not dared to take. Upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. Continued his speech until midnight. And there were many lights in the upper chamber, where they were gathered together. And there sat in a window a certain young man named Eutychus, being fallen into a deep sleep. And as Paul was long preaching, he sunk down with sleep and fell down from the third loft and was taken up dead. And Paul went down and fell on him, and embracing him said, "Trouble not yourself, for his life is in him." His life is in him. When he therefore was come up again, and had broken bread, and eaten and talked a long while, even till break of day, so he departed. And they brought the young man alive, and were not a little comforted. They brought the young man alive, and were not a little comforted. Paul has just raised a dead man. We want to know his secret. But Paul has left us his secret, because in that 7th verse we find the following words. On the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread. That's the first clue. Paul preached unto them ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. Until midnight. That's the second clue. When we have the meaning of breaking bread and midnight, we break universal sense hypnosis. You already know what breaking bread means. You take one loaf, and it is a symbol of the infinite body of Christ, the infinite Son of God, the infinite spiritual body that is yours. And he breaks the bread, and he gives it to each of the disciples, saying, "Here, this is my body," right? And so each one is to learn that this piece of bread he receives is only a symbol saying, the body of God individualizes as your infinite invisible body. Each of us is the body of Christ invisible. We all are of the one body, the one loaf of bread. And this is a symbol of breaking bread. And Paul had to do this. Paul had to realize the one infinite body before he could heal the student who had fallen down from the third loft. And the clue as to how you recognize and realize and live in the one infinite body, which is the symbol of broken bread, is given by the word midnight. That one word suddenly becomes large in our spiritual vocabulary. And we begin to notice it in the Bible more and more, whereas before we had passed it by. Midnight is not a time on a clock. Midnight is a level of consciousness. When you are at the midnight consciousness, you are at a certain place. And you will find the importance of midnight repeated again and again once you begin to look for it and to keep the eye open. And once you begin to see it frequently, you begin to ask yourself, what is it saying? Where is midnight? What level is it? Why don't they say it openly? And only when you have the answer do you know why it was not said openly. Now remember then, at midnight, by making prayer until midnight, Paul was able to raise a dead boy. And by making prayer unto midnight, you too will be able to raise the dead. And that demonstration includes raising every form of evil on this earth into the rightful expression of its own perfection. It means every detail of your life can express the uninterrupted grace of spirit when you learn how to pray until midnight. Let's look now at Acts 22, verse 6. Paul was always getting into trouble because he was always going out and talking about this great thing he had discovered. And in Jerusalem, he was really in trouble. The mob always wanted to stone him or hang him or do something to get rid of him. And now we find him in front of a castle in the square, and he is asked for an opportunity to explain his presence there to an angry mob. And in the course of it, he says these words, explaining his experience in Damascus. And it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. How peculiar that while being harassed by a mob, while literally fighting to save his life, he should say that I came to a certain place about noon. Why would he be so precise? Why would he mention the time when he came to Damascus and the light shone down upon him? Noon is the same as midnight. Midnight, 12 o'clock high. Noon, 12 o'clock in the mid-morning, between morning and afternoon. Always it's a midnight, midday. Before night breaks into the next day. Before morning breaks into the afternoon. It's a point before division, before breaking, before separation. And in each case it's the number 12, indicating that before separation, before division, there is fullness. That's what 12 signifies, the fullness of the spiritual realization, the fullness of the powers of God expressing in you. So midnight and noon are purposely given to us as the same key and repeated to show us it is the key. At noon, at 12 noon, the light shone through his consciousness in Damascus. And it is a significant word used there because that noon or midnight consciousness is what breaks the sense hypnosis. But still further, in 26 of Acts 13, here we find a repeat of the same thing, but now Paul has requested of Festus that he be granted an audience with King Agrippa, because he considers himself a Roman citizen, not subject to the whims and will of the mob, but rather he wants an audience under Roman law. And he's granted this audience. And so now he repeats to Agrippa the Damascus experience. And again, it's for his own life that he's begging. He's explaining who he is, what he stands for. And he says this: "At midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me." For the same purpose, he says, at midday. So we have midday, noon, or midnight, all 12 o'clock, all a point before a breaking. And this is so emphasized that we begin to suspect an invisible code which can lead us to that which prevents our breaking away from the one consciousness of God. And if you will dwell on this for just a moment now, and let your own consciousness tell you what midnight means or midday means, you will see that the word begins to have a very special significance for you. You might think of it like the last note in an octave of music. You start at the beginning, and after 7 notes, you come back to the first note. And the first note is the same as the last note. The beginning and the end are one and the same. Also, the last note is the beginning of the next octave, so that you have 7 notes and then a note which completes one octave. But that note which completes the first octave is also the beginning of the next octave. You might say it joins the two together. And if you do not leave that last note and proceed into the second octave, you are standing in between 2 octaves, joined together by 1 note. That is midnight. Midnight on the cosmic scale is the period of rest which joins together your spiritual selfhood and that material, visible expression which you call your human self. They are joined together at midnight. So he prayed until midnight. But if you go past, if you step out of that last note of the octave, if you step out of midnight into the next day, and they are not joined together anymore but separated, you move into humanhood. So midnight means returning to that point of consciousness before you step into humanhood. Or more precisely, returning to the consciousness you had before human birth. Paul was in the consciousness he had before human birth. That consciousness is the midnight level. That consciousness is the awareness of spiritual selfhood. That is the consciousness which is called the now consciousness. Not the self that wandered into human form and into time. That is not I am. That is the false sense of self. That is the self that was born of woman. But you must return to that self which existed before the form was born of woman. And that self is the midnight consciousness. That self is the only self that can break sense hypnosis. The universal hypnosis of the senses in which man is enslaved is a mental prison. Engulfing every single individual on the face of the earth. And the only escape from this mental prison is to return to the consciousness you had before human birth, which Paul had done. The power of that consciousness is one of the great hidden secrets of the Bible. It was in that consciousness that the great miracles of the Bible took place, whether they came through Abram or Moses or Paul or Jesus Christ. And it was always that consciousness functioning through an individual which was the expression of Christ. We have seen that Jesus was once on a mountain, and then he became aware of his disciples in trouble on the sea, and they saw him walking on the water, and then they saw him rebuke the winds and the waves, and when he stepped upon that ship, it was instantly upon the shore. And then soon thereafter, when the ship left with the disciples, Jesus was not upon it. But neither was he where the ship had arrived earlier. They found him in another city, and no one could figure how he got there. And that complete experience from mountaintop, walking on water, rebuking the winds, leading the ship instantly to shore, and then disappearing into another city, was all an expression of Christ consciousness. It was an expression of a consciousness that exists on earth today beyond the receptivity of our sense faculties, but is a consciousness which surrounds us, and it is called the Christ power. We have always mainly associated it with Jesus. And that has been a religious error. That Christ power which functioned through Jesus and demonstrated the so-called miracles was demonstrating the invisible kingdom of God on earth. And that Christ power is the same power that functioned enabling Paul to heal the boy who fell from the loft. And that Christ power functioned through Jesus Christ, through Paul, through Peter, through Abram, through Moses, through Joel Goldsmith, through some of the students of Joel Goldsmith, through students of Buddha and Lao Tzu. And that Christ power is present now in the midnight level of consciousness, calling all those to glory who can hear the word. It says to you, when you come back out of the form consciousness, which was born of woman, and find the self of you that was never born of woman, you will be in the midnight consciousness, the healing consciousness, the eternal life consciousness, and you will find that the world hypnosis has no power over you. In Genesis, well, before we go back to Genesis, let's look at something more recent. Let's look at the 10 virgins, which are recorded in the book of Matthew. I think that's chapter 25. It starts right out with the story of the 10 virgins, the 5 who trimmed the lamps, the 5 who didn't. And while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. But listen what it says in the 6th verse of chapter 25 in Matthew. And at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet him. And then in the 10th verse it says, And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came. And they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Well, when the door is shut, it means if you weren't ready, if you weren't at the midnight level when the bridegroom comes, there's no way to enter again, because the only way to enter is when the bridegroom comes, and the bridegroom comes at midnight, meaning what we have just learned, when you are in the consciousness that I was never born. When you have entered into the awareness of your permanent self which was never born, when you have accepted that as a truth, that you have a never-born self, and when you are willing to abide in your never-born self, the bridegroom comes. And then you go into the marriage. The bridegroom is Christ. But you see what that means? Christ is born in you. When you are willing to step out of the self born of woman. You have been trying to break sense hypnosis with your human mind, and you cannot do it. Try as you will, it will not work. Only Christ can break sense hypnosis. And Christ cannot be born in you when you are still that self which is born of woman. And that's the step you haven't dared to take. You haven't dared to stop living in the self that was born of woman. You haven't dared to return to midnight. You haven't dared to return to that point of rest between your infinite spiritual self and the expression of your visible, physical, material self. You haven't stood in the midway point between the invisible and the visible, between heaven and earth, between eternity and time, between infinity and space, between spirit and matter, between divinity and mortality. Mortality cannot break sense hypnosis. Universal sense hypnosis is only broken when the bridegroom comes. And then the 5 human senses have no power whatsoever to veil the kingdom of God. Your never-born self is present. It is the only begotten of the Father. You have been seeking Christ. You have been saying, I am the Christ. You have been wanting to find your own true Christhood. But no mortal can find it. In order for one to be born, one must die. Your unborn self can only come as your consciousness when your born self is rejected. The greater works do not come to the born self. The midnight miracle worker who functions through Paul, through Jesus, through Joel, through all those who have been willing to step out of mortality. And the only one who can heal in this entire universe is your never-born present self. If you want to see what your never-born self can do, come now back to Genesis. We'll go to the 20th chapter, I think. Well, first make it the 14th chapter. The 14th chapter of Genesis. And here we have Abram, and he's going to demonstrate to you something that we had passed by because we had no way then of understanding it. And when Abram, I'm in the 14th chapter and beginning with the 14th verse of Genesis. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them into Dan. It's strange he had 318 servants, isn't it, who were born in his own house. But if you add 3, 1, and 8, you get 12, don't you? Again, that's the symbol of midnight, the midnight consciousness, the fullness of God. And so they really weren't talking about servants, they were talking about his consciousness. Abraham had found his never-born self. That's what it's saying in code. He had found the level of consciousness called the midnight level, which means he had realized his spiritual selfhood, which was never born of woman. He had accepted that he was not Abraham, the person, the form, the body, the mortal, the flesh and blood. That was an image in mind. He accepted that he was the self that was never born, which is the self that can never die. And that means that when he armed 318 servants, he merely accepted that he was the never-born self, which has no beginning and no ending in time, which is pure spirit, perfect now as the Father, and ever present where you stand. That's all Abram did, was to know this. And then he divided himself again unto them, against them, he and his servants, by night, which by now you know means by midnight. and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot and his goods, and the women also, and the people. He was victorious because he had broken universal sense hypnotism. In the consciousness of his never-born self, the false powers of the world yielded, and the uninterrupted grace that is ever present manifested itself as his brother and the people all brought back safely. That is the power of your never-born self. We see it again and again and again once we have been awakened to it. I'm going to go, instead of to 20 Genesis, I'm going to go to Exodus. Exodus 11. This time it's Moses. In the 4th verse, and Moses said, Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt. It isn't midnight just accidentally, and it isn't midnight on a Big Ben clock. It's midnight in the consciousness of Moses, who has found that undivided one self, which was never born of woman. He is not being a prodigal wandering out of spirit into matter, wandering out into the false light of physical world, but remaining in the midnight of spiritual identity without wavering. And so the spirit of Moses, the never-born self of Moses, which is omnipresent, which covers all that we call time and space, slays the Egyptians. Egyptians always standing for the thoughts of the sense mind. And so in Exodus 12, we could look at 12:12, I think we could start there. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, meaning this midnight, in this new wonderful consciousness of the never-born self. I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. In your consciousness that you are the never-born self, not the physical self, the Spirit of God, omnipotent, functions its power through you. In such a way as we see in the same chapter, 28, verse of 12 chapter, and the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded. Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, and the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on the throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. You've been trying to break sense hypnotism, and this is the way. Now let's look a little more closely at our dear friend Paul. We still really haven't come to his great secret. But he gave us a secret. He gave it to us in words that were loud and definite, and we looked at those words, and in our human grossness, we simply refused to take them to heart. He said, I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. And if you compare that to the statement made by Jesus, you'll find they're the same statement. Jesus didn't say, I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. But that was the truth, wasn't it? Jesus could have said that. It was true. Instead of saying that, however, he said, Thou seest me. Thou seest the Father that sent me. Now, both statements are identical. Paul could have said that. Paul could have said, Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. They were both saying that I am not Paul, I am not Jesus. You see Paul, you see Jesus. But what is here is the Father that sent me. And what is living this life is not Jesus, but Christ. What is living this life is not Paul, but Christ. Now you know Jesus was born of the Father. And Paul is telling you that he too was born of the Father. Paul was telling you that like Jesus, he knew that he had never been born in a physical womb. He had accepted birth spiritually. He had found his spiritual self. He had rejected all physical birth. He knew that physical birth is an illusion of the sense mind. It is the one great illusion of sense hypnotism, the belief in physical birth. He had discovered the supreme illusion is physical birth. He had accepted that there is only one womb, one spiritual womb, and that we all come out of that. And he had accepted that because he was born of spirit, not of the flesh, because he was the child of God, because he was the Christ of God, that he was not Paul. There was no such person. He knew that he had never been born physically. He dared to take that step. And he even told us that. Christ liveth my life. Now, Christ doesn't live the life of a human being. Christ lives the life of Christ. And he told us, I am absent from the body, present with the Lord. He not only said that he wasn't born, he said he didn't have a body. He was absent from it. He said, there is no Paul here, there is no Paul self, and there is no Paul body here. You may see one, but that's your problem, not mine. You see, Paul never walked this earth in a body after Damascus. Up to Damascus, he thought he had a body. After Damascus, there was no Paul body in his consciousness, although the world saw one. Just as the world saw Jesus in a body, although there was no Jesus body there. There was only the invisible Christ appearing to human sense as Paul, or the invisible Christ appearing to human sense as Jesus. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father. That was one of Paul's greatest secrets. Paul was not there. Christ was. And that means the body of Paul wasn't there. The body of Christ was there. Paul had found his never-born self. That was the very backbone of his teaching and his demonstration. Paul was never born. He knew that this is God's universe, and that God is spirit, and that God is all. And if God is all, who is born? He accepted omnipresent spirit, one spiritual womb, no reality in physical birth. Physical birth was an illusion of the sense mind. I, Paul, am that spirit, that never beginning and never ending self that was never born. And so Paul was reborn of the Spirit. And then he went further. He was not only absent from the body because the body was never born, but he knew too that because the body wasn't born, the senses of the body were never born. If a body is not born, how can the senses of that body be born? They must be as illusory as the body itself. So Paul was also absent from the senses of the body. In other words, he gave no power to his senses. He knew that the senses had to lie, that no matter what they would see, it would not be the spirit. He knew that everything the senses see is a lie in this world, without exception. He knew this. It was a situation that you don't try to change. You let the senses do what they are doing because you can't stop them. But you do not believe what they are doing. If you are in the human mind, you do, but the moment you accept yourself to be the never-born self called spirit, then that acceptance is not complete if you believe what the senses are saying. If the senses say there's a person, there's a thing, there's an event, there's an action, you say, how can that be? There are no senses. The senses were never born. The senses are not born of God. It is the nature of human senses to tell the untruth about God. The senses must lie. That is the nature of them. And it is my function to know that is their nature and not to accept the evidence of the senses under any condition. That is transcending the senses. And when you can, let the senses do their thing while you are standing in the awareness that the senses are not telling the truth, but are accepting the invisible perfection of God functioning, where the senses say just the opposite. You are accepting yourself to be the invisible spirit. Paul had learned that technique. He knew that everything we see in this world is an image of the senses. That he had never seen a person. He had seen a sense image which the mind calls person. He had never seen the day. He had seen an image which the sense mind calls the day. He had never seen good. He had never seen evil. he had never seen anything in this world that was real or true. Only his images in mind. That is what he had seen, and that is what he no longer accepted. It was in this knowledge that he developed the healing consciousness to walk in the path of Christ. Now you and I today are going to look more closely at this healing consciousness of Paul's. And we're going to find that he was practicing the same principles that we are practicing in the infinite way. And although he did not in print or in words specifically say that he was not standing in form and that he was never born, he left us the words like midnight and midday and noon as a clue to let us know, if we had spiritual ears to hear, that that is the consciousness in which he stood, which enabled him to carry forth the work of the Father and to be one of the most potent instruments of the Christ that ever walked this earth. I say to you, that consciousness of Paul is present, and that consciousness of Jesus is present, that consciousness of Joel is present, and that consciousness, which is the Christ, is present where you stand, as your never-born self, waiting even now for you to step out of the belief that you were born and to accept the self that you are, which never emerged from the womb of flesh. Let us be still with that thought a moment. My never-born self is present. Please accept that within yourself. My never-born self is present. It contains everything that God has. You accept it, and you learn to live it, and it in turn expresses all that God has as your life. We'll pause a moment now, and when we return, bring with you your consciousness, which is the midnight level, the you that never entered into physical form, the you that is one with the infinite, never born, never dying, your only self. And then you too will find possibilities undreamed of on this earth. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. And then in the 119th Psalm, in the 62nd verse, at midnight I will rise to give thanks unto thee because of thy righteous judgment. Now that secret place of the Most High at midnight is your awareness that you were never born, and your ability to live not from the sense of what's in it for me, or what do I get out of this, or how does it affect me, but to live from the focus of the never-born self, which doesn't operate through the sense mind. It doesn't look through human eyes and say, I see that and therefore that's there, or I feel this and therefore this is here. But rather, the never-born self accepts only the perfection of God's presence, no matter what the senses see. That's at midnight. That's the meaning. And Paul, who could accept this and look through the senses and see what the senses see and not believe a word of it, knowing that what I see is not what's there, what I touch is not what's there, what I taste and smell is not what's there, only God is there. That is living in the never-born self and not living in the sense self. That is living at midnight. And then we go right on to Acts 16, verse 25. And at midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God. And the prisoners heard them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison was shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's hands were loosed. In your never-born self there is a great earthquake, and all the doors are opened, and everyone's hands are loosed. And that is why Paul could say that neither life nor death could separate him from the love of God. In Ephesians, he said, according as he hath chosen us in him before the foundation of the world. That's Ephesians 1:4. He has chosen us in him before the foundations of the world. He's speaking of his never-born self. Not the self born after the world, but that self born in him of the Father before the foundations of the world. That we should be holy and without blame before him in love. He was aware of the self that had never been born. Now, we in our work here, we've had a lot of lessons on how to erase concepts, how to stand with no material thought. But look how much further Paul took that. He didn't erase concepts. He removed the person who had the concepts. Just as Jesus, thou seest me, thou seest not Paul, but the Father. In other words, every illusion in this world depends completely on you. The illusion of a lifespan, the illusion of material disease, material disaster, material evil, bad business, bad health, bad domestic relations, all these illusions depend completely upon you. You've accepted them as realities, and you're under sense hypnosis. They are not. They are images formed in you by the senses, and you have believed them. Now, you can fight these images all day long. You can react to them. You can try to dominate and subdue them. But Jesus didn't dominate the water. Jesus didn't get up and try to do something about it. He simply saw the image, but standing in the self that was never born, looking at an image that the physical eye saw, he knew it was not there. When he says react not, judge not, condemn not, he's telling you not that the images aren't there alone, but that the senses of you that view those images are not created by God. And that the body of you in which the senses are was not created by God. It was created of the flesh, of the sense mind, of the universal sense mind, born of the universal mind. And he's telling you that you cannot judge because there is no you there to judge. And so when Paul tells us that we were in the Father before the foundation of the world, he's saying exactly what Jesus himself said. You remember it in the 17th chapter of John when he prays for his disciples before leaving them. Father, I will that thee also, whom thou hast given me, be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which thou hast given me, for thou lovest me before the foundations of the world. He was speaking of that self of him before the foundation of the world, the never-born self, in which all the power of God is. You cannot, when you are in the never-born self, form any human judgments. And as long as you are forming human judgments, you are rejecting the never-born self, which judges not. Paul removed the self that can judge. Paul wasn't there. In one fell swoop, he took away the viewer, who can be tricked by the senses. He did more than erase the concept, he erased the viewer, the beholder, the false human being, the self not of God. the one not in God before the foundation of the world. In the beginning was your never-born self, which is the Word of God. I think we can sum up Paul's healing consciousness in a few words. There was no viewer there to be tricked by sense hypnotism. And you can do the same. The senses can continue to do what they do mechanically and automatically. Let them. Do not improve the sense images. Do not affirm the goodness of God, and do not deny the appearance of the evil. Joel emphasized, do not deny the images. We usually say, oh, that isn't there. The minute you say that isn't there, you've made a great mistake. It's true, it's not there. But the you that is saying it's not there is not there. And the minute you say it is not there, that you is going to block all of the good work you're trying to do. The you that says the images aren't there is an image itself. It is the illusion maker through which all the other illusions come. And you must get rid of the illusion maker, the you. And so, improve no image. Affirm no image. Deny no image. Judge no image. Remove the viewer. Paul did nothing but remove the viewer by living in the midnight level of the no personal self. There is no me here to judge this, to improve this. It is not my function. There is no power needed. Grace is. In the never-born self, we stand non-reactive, non-affirming, non-denying, non-improving, non-judging, simply being the never-born. And that is one with Source. And then that grace which is present, flowing invisibly, flows into the visible, and the sense images become soul images. The time images become now images. And if people come to you, they are released from their sense hypnosis because you are released from sense hypnosis. If your business is bad, who said so? You're looking at that which the eye sees, that which the mind reacts to. Let the business be bad in the appearance world, but stand in your never-born self knowing that where God is, perfection is. Don't try to change the bad business to a good business. You do not heal spiritually with a human mind. You heal not by trying to heal, but by resting in the never-born self. And that which we call healing then appears. Regardless of what the human appearance is, do not bother about it if you wish to heal it spiritually. Learn to live in your never-born self. And then the power released through the Son of God, which is the never-born self, redeems, rejects, resurrects, and appears as That which you had wanted in the first place, called better business, better health, better domestic relations. The word midnight then means before human birth. Before human birth. And whenever you come across it, remember that it is your function to obey the scriptural command that you praise the Father at midnight. Now there is an unbroken continuity of grace flowing all around you. But it can only come into your unborn self. And then you are taken out of the sense stream, back to that level of consciousness which is undivided from source, which draws from infinity. And you're in what might be called the equilibrium or the balanced rest. That's the level of consciousness which knows the self that is before the world was. In each incarnation, you have forgotten the incarnation before, and you will continue repeating that cycle until you come to this midnight consciousness, which is the permanent consciousness. Then all divisions are removed. The invisible and the visible become one. You're lifted above sense consciousness, above false power, and into the realm of no power needed. And that's where the healings occur. Because you're then above universal belief, you're above the world mind, and you're resting in that great cosmic vacuum. There's also a point in the midnight consciousness which is sort of split second, in which you know nothing, but know everything because you know nothing. It's that split second of unknowing. And that is what opens the door to infinity. We find then a new kind of sustenance. You might call it soul food. It's the bread that is not physical bread, but the bread that comes from the mouth of God. That's above mind, above your sense of a human selfhood, where you live not by bread alone. And this is really an out-of-the-body experience. It takes you into that life which is without beginning, without division, without separation, without interruption, without imperfection, the life which is indestructible, the real now. You see, now and before birth are one and the same. After birth, we're in time. And we're flowing actually in a state of nothingness away from now. But before birth, we're in the eternal now, the eternal midnight, before the false light of dawn. And here my Father and I are one, because this is pure consciousness. Before divinity appears to human sense as human beings is before birth. Before divine life appears to human sense as form. Before spirit appears to human sense as material man. And before heaven appears to human sense as material earth. This is how we live in the kingdom of God now. It is called being awake. And those who do not return before birth, but linger in the consciousness of a human being after birth, are asleep. Birth is the dividing point. Now, I want to be sure that each of us develops this consciousness of living in the self that was never born. And so I've got to give you some instructions on a program. And I want to suggest that after you hear this tape, you come back to this particular point we're about to go into and follow these instructions very carefully and very faithfully. Today, if you find it possible, write down the following instructions to yourself, and either take 5 sheets of paper or 5 cards. Keep the instructions separate. Don't put them all on one sheet. And on one sheet, or one slip of paper or one card, later today, you don't have to do it right now, write down the following statement. My never-born self is present. My never-born self is present. Just write it down once on a slip or on a card. And then on another slip or card, write the following statement. All bodies are sense images. All bodies are sense images. Now on the third one, write, nothing I see today is real. Nothing I see today is real. Now on the fourth sheet or card, write, improve no sense images today. Improve no sense images today. And on the fifth card or sheet, write, sense images have no power. Sense images have no power. Now here's what I want you to do with those 5 sheets of cards that you've written. Put them in your bedroom, where you can get them the moment you wake up in the morning, so that if you had written them tonight, upon awakening tomorrow, before you get out of bed, reach out and take number 1 and look at it and read it. In fact, it would be good to label these sheets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the order given to you, so that tomorrow morning you would take number 1. You wake up, you reach under your pillow or out to your boudoir or whatever you've got near you, your nightstand, and you pick this up and you look at it and it says, "My never-born self is present." And the importance of seeing it right then is that if you don't see it, believe me, that's the last thing you're going to be thinking about. And you're going to walk straight into sense hypnotism from the rest of the day on until something pulls you out. But if you see this, my never-born self is present, now then, if that is a truth, which I believe it is, lie there or sit up, take it into consciousness, spend 5 or 10 minutes with it, or go downstairs in your den or upstairs in your living room, go anywhere you like with it, and sit there with it, digesting it, contemplating it, putting it into your consciousness like a seed and dwelling with it in the silence until you know your never-born self is not only present, but it is the only self you are. And then, after you have completed that, I don't care if you're going to work or you're going to go drive an ambulance for the Red Cross or you're going on a picnic or whatever you're going to do. If you want to live in your never-born self, the next thing for you to do is this. Every hour on the hour that day, for 20 or 30 seconds, nothing more than a few flicks of the eyelid, you might say, close your eyes wherever you are. No, my never-born self is present, and it is myself now. I said every hour for 20 or 30 seconds. That means you're going to be doing it maybe 16, 18 times that day. And the mind won't want to do it. It'll say at certain times, "Oh, well, I'll skip this one or that one." Don't let it get away with that. I don't care if you're hanging on a cable car with one foot off. You can know your never-born self is present, and you'd better know it. And that's the first day's work. And the second night, be sure you've got the second one where you can get it in the morning. And when you wake up the second morning, reach out, get it, look at it, and it will say, "All bodies are sense images." Now, if you didn't read that at that moment in the morning, you would go out and you would not realize that what you're looking at is a sense image. You would feel resentment toward this one, or goodness toward this one, or anger toward that one, or envy toward the other. You would be treating them all as if they were reality. You would be reacting. And you would be acting out of your sense self. So now you take this, you go to your den, or you sit in the bed, or you do what you have to. You get the awareness that all bodies are sense images. And then when you go out into your daily living, look at those sense images out there and see if they hold for you the same intimidation they did the day before. See if you're quite as concerned about the fears that the world has presented to you in the past, or the anxieties, or the anguishes, or the tragedies. See if you can't get some of this true feeling that these really are sense images. And even look down at yourself and recognize the sense image you had thought was present isn't there. And again today, the second day, every hour, without fail, for 20 or 30 seconds, get your eyes closed and know all bodies are sense images. And then go about your business not reacting to those sense images, not giving them powers they don't have. So on each day, you take another one. And after 5 days, I think you'll get the idea that something is happening. You are really doing something about terminating the domination of the world sense mind in you. You're no longer a student, you're no longer reading, you're no longer theorizing, you're doing, you're applying, you're living it out. And don't be surprised if people start coming and saying, I have a problem. Fine. Let's take one. What's their problem? Normally you're going to say, well, I'll get rid of it for you, or I'll try to. And if you want to say that to them, go ahead. But know better within yourself. That problem that they have brought to you, they have because they are living in the sense mind and in the sense body. That's why they have the problem. And that's why you have some problems too. Now they have brought you that problem because they don't know anything about getting out of the sense hypnotism. All they know is they've got a problem. And if you meet it on that level, you've got a problem. Because when you meet it on that level, you're not in the midnight consciousness. Now, when they bring that problem to you, if you've been doing your homework, they will bring that problem to someone who isn't there. You will eventually be in your never-born self, and your never-born self will receive this problem, and it will not improve the problem. It will not affirm the problem. It will not even deny the problem. It will say, there is no me here to know that such a problem exists. That's all. There is no me here to recognize that problem. Now, this isn't what you're telling the person who's brought it to you. You just take the job and you say, fine, I'll do my work. But what you do is, you must say to yourself, there is no me here to recognize this problem. I was never born. And although it's very difficult at first, as you continue to do this and apply the 5 points that we have established for you to practice daily, you'll find it's easier to do, and you will simply stand in a non-reactive state in the knowledge of your own true never-born self. And the never-born self cannot react to that which is of this world. You simply do nothing. You know nothing. You think nothing. You are nothing. And that's all you do. And this is your split second of unknowing. This is the Paul consciousness in which there is no viewer. No one there to affirm or deny or improve or judge. No viewer. No person. You are not there because you were never born of woman. And do you see that breaks your sense hypnotism. And that breaks the sense hypnotism for the other individual, and that is the end of their problem if you can unwaveringly stand in this never-born self. Some of you have done it already very well, and you've seen miracles. Because the minute you break the sense hypnotism in yourself, the grace that is present has to flow. The problem is that you then go back into a human selfhood instead of staying in your never-born selfhood. Now you have these 5 sheets of paper that you're to do for 5 days. Can you do them for 30 days? Can you then start number 1 after you finish number 5? Now you can jumble them up the second week, any sequence, it doesn't matter. Just pick one. The next day just pick any one. Close your eyes and pick one. But when you wake up, pick one and look at it. And then spend the day with it, the way we discussed. Now we want to learn another way to meditate. And this is a 3-part meditation. And we'll do it by starting in our never-born self. I won't describe the levels of the meditation, but hopefully they will just happen. And as they happen within us, we can make a note of them. But first stand in the knowledge that there is no physical form where you stand. Simply isn't there. That is a permanent truth. It is a sense image. Everybody sees it within their own self. In myself, I see a sense image which I call you. Your friends see a sense image within themselves which they call you. And you look at yourself and you see a sense image in your mind which you call you. But that's all that's present, the sense image of you in everyone's mind. There's no human you there. Something else is there that will never die, that has never been sick. Something that Jesus said was untouchable by human hands. Pilate, you cannot harm me, you can't even touch me. All you can touch of me, Pilate, is the image of me that you have in your mind. My never-born self is here, and it is untouchable by human hands because it is the temple not made with hands. The glory that I had with thee before the foundation of the world, says the Father, is still mine. Your never-born self is the begotten Son. Where does it begin? Go back in time as far as you like. Where does it begin? Where does the Son of God begin? Why, even before Abraham was, is your never-born self. It is a continuous, now living self. That is yourself. It has nothing to do with human forms. It is totally independent. It is the life which you accept, and in every direction it is without limitation and without limit. It is omnipresent life, never born into human form. Keep your conversation in heaven, said Paul, meaning, live in this never-born life. Let the world come to you, and let it hit against this consciousness that I am the never-born life of God. There is no other me. And as you rest there, there comes a peace called my peace, in which your human senses cease to function. It's as if they were locked out, and the world is locked out. And in this peace, you have the first degree of this meditation. There is no world, there is no human, there is no person, place, thing, or event. There is only this quiet peace of the never-born life. It is very pleasant to rest there and to know that I am everywhere now because I am the never-born life. There's nowhere where I do not exist. I am the invisible allness behind that which men call the world. When you reach this stage, you can find a name for it if you want one. To me, it's a sort of a locked-in feeling. Everything else is locked out and I'm locked in. And it's a great joy to know that this consciousness is a doorway. It rests between the outer senses and the soul. It may be called the beginning of the midnight consciousness. And as you abide there, in some subtle alchemy of the spirit, there is an escalation that takes place. Something rises within, like an elevator. you become aware of another, I suppose the word is presence, another intelligence, another force that is coming through, and it begins to come into your consciousness as another you, a higher you. And it really is the never-born self making itself known. And when it begins to take the entire play above your mind, so that you find yourself totally incapable of doing anything but being fascinated and transfixed by this higher force, then you are finding the bridegroom is coming. And this is Christ taking over your consciousness. And as exciting as it is, it's only the second degree. Even while you're out of your human selfhood almost completely in this second degree, the third degree comes, and it is God the Father speaking to Christ the Son. It isn't Christ speaking to your human self. It's the second degree consciousness receiving the word from God the Father. And sometimes God says Son, and that's God speaking to Christ. And when you reach that degree, you're apt to think you can go no further. You're almost afraid to. But remain there. When it happens, as it will, because if you abide in that third degree where God the Father speaks to God the Son, you will be very close to attaining the conscious awareness of a second birth. And that is a cataclysmic experience which never leaves you the same, and in which you realize that anything is possible. Strangely, that very top of the third degree, which could be called the fourth, will eventually become your permanent consciousness. And it won't take as much of a strain or as much effort on your part. It will just be a normal thing to dwell there. And all of this is based upon beginning with the knowledge that all on earth who are born of woman are not here. Because all that is here is the never-born Christ, not born of woman, not made of human flesh. And that self you will learn to live in more and more in order to break the universal hypnotism of the senses in which man lives and dies in repeating cycles. I ask you not only to practice this type of meditation once a day, and the others every hour for 20 or 30 seconds, but when you're not in meditation, to also know that you cannot be the never-born self and the born self. You cannot be both, and if you're acting to improve the born self, you're only fooling yourself. You've done that up to now, most of your life, trying to improve, protect, and safeguard, and in some way do something for this born self. Let it go. Trust your never-born self to know and to do whatever must be done. And live out from that focus. Start to do it sincerely and faithfully. It will do what you have never been able to do. And it is the road to freedom, permanently. Except a man be born again, he cannot know the kingdom of God. And so now we have started our tape classes again, having given you 2 months after the seminar to crystallize, solidify, piece together. And now all those high ideals that we shared together, we are bringing into focus. We are moving to the experience of the self that was never born, which is the permanent self. And we are making the attempt to live in it consciously in the manner shown to us by Paul and Jesus and John. And don't be troubled or concerned about difficulties along the way. You'll find that these difficulties are going to be rather small in comparison to the difficulties you would encounter if you were not working from this level, because this will dissolve future difficulties. If you have any questions, if anything isn't clear, get on the phone or drop me a note. Remember now, we're sharing this together, living in the one never-born self. We want to help each other. Put a finger to your lips, because this is a private work that can only be shared with those who are doing the same. And so we continue the Catalina experience. The rosebud is blossoming. I thank you all for having come to the seminar and for sharing your consciousness, because it was really the consciousness of the 70 who attended that came outwardly as the talks of that seminar. It was your consciousness collectively which became the talks that we all heard. That's how the Father works. And it is your continued consciousness in spirit, individually and collectively, that will manifest in this world as the power of the Father expressing through the never-born Son of God. Again, much love. And remember that as you work on the hour, others will be working too. If you wish, and I think this might be a good idea, that evening meditation of the 3 degrees we can all do together this month. I think a time that might be good for all of us would be 8 o'clock. So let's set it for 8, and I'm sure that you'll miss 1 or 2, and I'm sure you'll try not to. But 8 o'clock this month, we'll all do the 3-degree meditation. And as you're also doing the hourly meditations for 20 and 30 seconds, be sure that many others will be doing them, and I certainly will with you. So we've got an active month ahead in the never-born self. Much love until we meet again.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into our channel. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button below. It really helps us out. And why not share this video with your friends? Spread the word and help us reach more people. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a new video from us. Thanks for watching and see you next time.